Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. It's another beautiful day here at Aoyama Park next to Tokyo National Art Center. When I arrived here a short time ago, there were a couple of salarymen here enjoying their lunches, dressed in the usual salaryman uniform, which consists of a dark suit, a briefcase, a white shirt, and rubber-soled shoes for the amount of walking which most Japanese salarymen have to do over the course of a day. I brought my own lunch to enjoy before I made the video. It's a typical lunch that many salarymen who live on a tight budget might enjoy. A piece of bread, onigiri or rice ball, and a can of beer. It cost me a grand total of about 600 yen, so yeah, a tasty lunch. So anyway, today's video is about an interesting camera which I acquired last week. I've been home a lot more recently for the obvious reasons, and spending a little bit more time on the internet than is healthy, I would say. And while I was searching around, I came across this old Rangefinder camera for sale in one of Japan's various auction sites. So when I first saw a photo of it, I mistook it for an Arco or something like that, so I placed a bid on it, and it turned out it wasn't an Arco, which tends to sell for a fair amount of money here in Japan, so no one else bid on it. And so I ended up winning this camera, and it arrived in the mail the day before yesterday. Once I received it, I began doing a little bit of research on it, and when I searched in English, I couldn't really find anything but a couple of photos on the internet. And searching in Japanese, I found a few more photos and maybe a paragraph or two of information about it. So, yeah, quite an unusual camera. What it happens to be is a Novo 35 2A rangefinder camera, which was made in Japan back in the 1950s. Now, Novo was the camera manufacturing brand name of a larger company called Daihyaku. And Daihyaku seemed to have closed its doors and vanished around 1960 or so. Not a large number of these cameras were produced, and maybe there were 3 or 4 variations. They weren't widely sold, and after receiving this camera and doing a little bit of research, I started searching the normal places I go to when I'm looking for cameras here, and I could not find any more. Not a single example of any model of Novo camera, so it makes it, I guess, quite rare. So anyway, I'll go ahead and describe the features and functions of the Novo 35 in case you're one of those very few people who happens to have one and would like to know how it works. First, of course, we have the film rewind knob on the top, which extends and pulls up the fork so you can easily insert and remove 35mm film cartridges or canisters. Next to that, we have a shoe for the flash, or flash gun, which is held on by 3 slotted screws. I took the screws and the flash shoe off to attempt to adjust the rangefinder. Then I found out that there's no way to adjust the rangefinder externally on one of these cameras. In order to do it, you have to remove the top cover completely. On the right side here, we have the shutter button with a threaded collar which goes around it, and if you remove the collar, you can use one of the older style, I guess, cable release attachments, which were mainly designed for twin lens reflex cameras, but which you could also use on cameras like the Nikon F or this particular camera here. And next to that, we have the film winding knob, and with a very simple mechanical film counter dial on the bottom, and a movable dial on the top, which you can use to remind you if you have film loaded in the camera or not loaded, or what kind of film you have. The back of the camera is quite simple. We only have the viewfinder window for the viewfinder rangefinder, and you have this funny square spot here, which is the recess where the film pressure plate happens to sit. So when the camera was designed, they decided to give it a rather thin profile, I guess to make it easier to hold and handle. And in order to give it enough range or distance between the lens and the film, they had to add this, I guess, recess in the back. The bottom of the camera is quite simple. We have a standard 1/4-inch tripod socket, and then we have the release lever, which you must depress in order to rewind the film. Like most rangefinder cameras, the important functions are located around the lens, On the bottom we have, or the first ring, is the focusing ring, which comes with a handy focusing tab. The focusing scale is located on the side of the lens rather than on the top, so to look at it you have to look at the side of the camera, and the depth of field scale is also located on the side of the lens. I have no idea why they decided to put it in that location. Perhaps there wasn't enough room to put it on the top. It's still easy enough to read, but when you're reading, you kind of have to take a glance in this direction to see what the distance is. The distance on this particular lens is measured in feet, and the other photos of these cameras which I came across are also measured in feet. So I would guess that the Novo cameras were designed originally for export, though it seems not so many made it outside Japan. The next thing we have is around the shutter assembly. We have the shutter charging lever located on the top. We have a socket here to attach the sync cord for flash gun. Here we have the self-timer lever, and on the bottom we have the aperture selecting lever. So quite a simple layout. To operate the camera is quite simple. The first thing you have to do is advance the film. The next thing you have to do is charge the shutter. So there are two steps required when you are getting ready to take a photo. Then you would select your aperture by using the bottom lever here, and then you would select the shutter speed with the shutter speed ring. This particular camera has a copal shutter with a range of 1 second to 1/300th of a second. And it's very similar to some of the earlier high-quality twin lens reflex cameras which were made in Japan. Things like the maybe Yashima Flex or Mamiya Flex carry the same shutter. There are two variations of the shutter I was able to find on the Novo 2A. One has a maximum speed of 1/200th of a second, whereas this one has a maximum speed of 1/300th of a second. So once you select your shutter speed and your aperture, you would of course focus, compose, and then shoot. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Like other rangefinder cameras which have a separate film winding and shutter charging system, it's quite easy to get this jammed up. You try to advance the film winding mechanism, and you try to get the shutter button to press, but it won't move. This is very similar to the old Konica 1 and 2 series camera. In order to free this up, you simply have to release the film winding mechanism and turn the film winding lever, lock it back up, and then that should release the shutter button and allow you to shoot the camera. Film loading in the Novo 35 is quite easy. To open the film door, there's a tab located on the left side of the camera on the top. Lift that up and just open the film door. The inside of the camera is painted with a black crinkle finish to prevent any reflections or refractions. To load the film, you would pull up on the film rewind knob, insert your film cartridge, push this back down so the teeth engage in the cartridge, and that will hold it in place. Pull your film leader over the window here in behind the lens and feed the end into the take-up spool. Wind the take-up spool, and making sure that the film leader engages the winding spool here on both sides with the teeth on the spool lined up with the holes in the film. You have to close and latch this manually. It doesn't do it by itself. And once the film is loaded, simply, I usually do it 3 times just to make sure that I have any exposed film pushed on the inside. And then you would set the film counter dial manually to match the number of exposures on the film you have loaded in the camera. For example, if I were loading a 36 exposure roll of film, I would manually turn the ring until it shows 36 as is shown on the dial, and then the camera is good to go. Now, the best feature about the Novo 35 2A compared to other similar rangefinder cameras is its lens. It features a Tomioka Tri-Lausar lens, which is quite a simple lens. In this case, it's a 45mm f2.8 lens. But Tomioka was a manufacturer of very high quality lenses in Japan, and also lenses for, from cameras to microscopes and medical equipment. They used a really high quality glass and coating system, so very high quality lenses. Some of my favorite cameras feature Tomioka lenses, for example the early Pigeon Flex and Yashima Flex cameras, or cameras like the Polaroid 180, 190, and 195, which are quite expensive nowadays. Their lenses were also made by the Tomioka company. So anyway, that's it for my video about the Novo 35 2A rangefinder camera. I wish I knew more about these cameras. If anyone out there does know more about them, please feel free to leave some information in the comments section below. I'll be posting more videos about vintage Japanese cameras and photography in the future, so if you're interested in seeing these, please subscribe. If you have any other kind of questions, or there's a camera you would like to see a review about, please let me know in the comment section. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.